There were a lot of metaphors we used for The Office. And the visual metaphor that Greg gave us for the show at large was like a paved over concrete, sort of boring looking and like office parking lot with one little kind of flower peeking up through a crack in the pavement. And his point was like, this is a satire about the modern world of parking lots and office parks and fluorescent lights and drop ceilings. But like the soul of the show was that little flower that somehow has found its way, that little tiny bit of brightness that has found its way through a crack in this very sort of paved over universe, right? And that was a very powerful metaphor. I think about that all the time.
Greg had always envisioned having writer-actors. He came from Saturday Night Live and the British show too. I mean, Ricky Gervais was writer-actor. So I think he thought that there was something organic and fun and the sort of like playful, rebellious spirit in just doing it yourselves, like Monty Python or something.
The show had such a different feel, and I wanted to have such a sincere feel to it. The enemy of that to me is the factory TV process, which Hollywood is often guilty of. And I would definitely say don't admire too much, because a lot of times in this factory process, the actors are kept apart from the writers and they distrust each other, and it leads to a certain type of writing where the writers write actor-proof lines, which are very jokey because they don't trust the actors to be able to deliver them without a setup and a punchline in the same speech. To me, what was so wonderful about The Office was that behavior was what was funny.
The way that we would start a season, we'd start with what we would call a blue sky period, which was my favorite part of every year. For 2, 3, 4 weeks sometimes, if we had a long time. Every single day in the writer's room was just, what if? There's no penalty. There's no, maybe we can't. There's no, but this one conflicts with that one. What if Dwight goes to the moon? What if Jim and Pam get divorced? What, just every idea is valid.
We had a situation on The Office where the initial pitch, there was an episode where Michael, by mistake, hits Meredith in the parking lot with his car. So the initial pitch for that was that he runs her over and kills her.
I took her to the hospital, and the doctors tried to save her life. They did the best that they could, and she is going to be okay.
The showrunner would say, all right, we don't have anything for Dwight. Or like, how about everyone split up and come up with 10 ideas for Ryan? Or, let's come up with more ensemble stories. There would be sort of a leadership that way.
I mean, I like to say, well, what's unique about the psychology of the character that could be a comedy engine for a long time? There's so many interesting, funny people around in your own life. And if you are a fan of like analyzing them and trying to figure out why you're laughing at them, that to me is like the first stage. With Dwight, for example, he was improvising in an interview, and he said, Dwight Schrute, my father's name was Dwight Schrute, my grandfather's name, Dwight Schrute. He said Amish. And as soon as that was like that, we're like, that's nice. And, and that kind of went and took the character in this sort of rural direction. And a lot of it came out of Rain's own family. And, for various times, you write something about the character's backstory. The actor has to provide photos. If you want to do something about when the character was 12 years old, the actor has to go find his own photos of himself when he's 12 and bring them in so they can be manipulated into whatever the joke is. And Rain came in with this photo album of himself. He grew up like in rural Oregon or something, Washington. And he came in and just started talking about all of his uncles and aunts and, these kind of farm people. You didn't want the character to be, one-dimensional nerd or something like that. So the idea of like a farm nerd was like, that's cool. That's a lot of... Yeah.
Mose, what are you doing? No, Mose, put the manure down. Put it down. Do not throw it. Do not.
One of the things that I thought was really brilliantly constructed by Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant in The Office was how the four main characters kind of fed on each other, in the sense that Michael had no social skills but desperately cared what other people thought. and Dwight could give a shit what anybody thought, but also had no social skills. And, you know, Jim didn't really care about what other people thought, but had wonderful social skills. And, you know, they all were like, they fit into each other nicely.
After those 6 episodes aired that nobody liked, Steve Carell became a gigantic movie star. Just totally coincidentally, 40-year-old version comes out, and the world goes, oh my God, look at this guy. Look how funny he is, and look how kind he is, and look how talented he is. And NBC goes, well, we have this giant movie star under contract, right? So let's think about how we should take that information and use it for the show. And the way we should is by saying that guy, that character that he's playing in that movie is so empathetic, or sympathetic rather, and so kind and so lovely. We need to take 20% of that energy and put it into Michael Scott. And the writers, his own writers, me included, rebelled and said, you're going to ruin it, and this is the thing that Ricky and Steven created is perfect, and how dare you, and the whole point is it's supposed to be bleak, and Michael Scott's like David Brent is a terrible person, and blah, blah, blah. And Greg patiently listened to all of us and heard us all out and said, no, you dummies, I'm going to do it this way. And we're going to just add a tiny little glimmer of hope to the end of every episode.
Like in that Dundies episode at the beginning of season 2, he was exactly the same dude. He was exactly as annoying and obnoxious and like had a massive blind spot. But at the very end of that episode, like another random dude in the bar that he's in starts like making fun of him, and you just see like Jim and Pam and other people go like, hey, don't make fun of him, that's our boss, he's our friend, and they kind of end up sticking up for him. And just those tiny little things just make a huge difference. And The Office definitely would have gotten canceled, I think, if we hadn't done that.
That is the difference between that show lasting 12 episodes and lasting 200.
If you notice on the show, it's only certain characters sort of have the permission to have that familiarity with the camera and the cameraman, and other characters who have less self-awareness do it less, and it works great. Like, for instance, Rainn Wilson, who plays Dwight, I think is a kind of character who has less self-awareness, and he doesn't do it as much as, say, John Krasinski and Jenna Fisher, who played Jim and Pam, the two, like, the love interests.
There it is.
Yeah, it's kind of saying, does anyone else see how crazy this is? So you have to be kind of a reasonable character to get away with it. Although when Michael Scott does it, it has a different flavor. It's usually, uh-oh, I just blew it again, didn't I? Oh, yes, I did. And that's what makes a great comedy character, I think, is someone without any self-knowledge. A lot of humor is coming from characters who don't know themselves or have, weird problems, and a lot of heart comes from them learning about themselves or solving some of their problems. But every time that they do that, which maybe makes a great episodic ending, you're chipping away a little bit at the engine for the show. I don't like jokes that are jokey jokes. Yeah, that could have been in a gum wrapper, like, like Double Bubble.
Knock knock. Who's there? KGB. KGB.
We will ask the questions.
What the hell was that?
But I mean, I think what it is natural dialogue, and it's like back and forth, and the joke is in what a character says to respond to whatever prompt he's given.
Okay, too fast. Everyone, we need to pump at a pace of 100 beats per minute.
Oh, okay. That's hard to keep track. How many is that per hour?
One time I wrote a bunch of jokes because the scene wasn't working, and I was the guy in charge of bringing alts, as we call them, other versions. So I'd bring alts to the set, and he looked at all of them and he said, I don't know, these just feel like jokes to me. And I was like, well, yeah, they're jokes. That's what I do. That's what we do. But for him, comedy was a byproduct of authenticity. I would compare it to the difference between a kid who knows he's cute and a kid who doesn't. A kid who knows he's cute is not cute. A kid who just says something without realizing cute is hilarious. And that's what he wanted The Office to feel like.
One of the big engines of The Office was an individual romance story. And for me, who was going into it not having written about that kind of stuff, I mean, King of the Hill is a family show, and, I feel like I had more comedy writing than romance writing in my background. I thought it was really interesting to try and debate that. And we used to have these enormous debates on the writing staff, but none of us had any kind of romance background. We were all comedy writers, and we were trying to, figure it out.
The writing staff executed that relationship so slowly and carefully. Greg used to describe it as like a spider web that like if you shifted the angle that you were looking at it, it would catch the light in different ways, and a little bit of dew would sort of glisten at a certain angle, but if you cocked your head the other way, it would sort of disappear. You wouldn't be able to see it. It was this really fragile, delicate thing that was sort of growing in the margins of the show. That was part of the genius of The Office. Like, we told these tiny, tiny, tiny little stories about how a delicate relationship sort of blossoms in this very, very slow way. You can't just do that. You can't just run the same playbook with another two people in another show, in another setting, with another theme. We're 70 years deep into TV at this point, and every story has been told 100 ways, and the people don't have any patience for this anymore. If you're just trying to run a sort of standard playbook of like, oh, this is a Jim and Pam, or this is a Sam and Diane, or this is a Ross and Rachel, like everyone is just onto you very quickly. And so the goal became, tell a real story about real people, and treat your characters like they're real people, and try to figure out how the real relationship would go.
The idea was, why are they not getting together, and how do you keep them apart? The second half of season 3, the obstacle was, one was Rashida Jones, who Jim was dating, but was also getting Pam to have enough self-confidence where, one, the audience felt she deserved Jim, and two, she could speak up for herself and try and get him away from Rashida. And so the whole thing with the Coles was to get her to walk the Coles later when everyone was gone, to give her the confidence then do whatever.
There were a lot of reasons to call off my wedding. But the truth is, I didn't care about any of those reasons until I met you.
There's such a writer impulse to cringe and brace yourself when you hand your script off to be filmed and produced. And this is one of the only experiences I've ever been exposed to where the writers can't wait for it to get in the hands of the actors. Like a line like that, Steve Carell is going to make it more brilliant than you ever thought. And that's so rare because writers are so egotistical about what they've written. And to actually honestly expect in your heart of hearts that they're going to make it better than you imagined, like there's very few places where that will happen. Scenes that felt like they were just airtight, winner, hilarious scenes in the writer's room sometimes just would not work on set. And you had to learn to not be angry at it for not working. You had to learn to listen to the audience, because writing is really, it's just a guess. If you want to test your stand-up at 1,000 rooms before you do it on TV, or if you want to test the stuff you're writing for The Office in as many groups as you can, do it. Because you're not smarter than the audience. It's for the audience.
The writing and entertainment industry needs to do something to the person who's reading it or taking it in or watching it or whatever. It either needs to make them laugh, or it needs to move them or scare them or something. And writing that is just sort of meandering without actually doing something to the viewer, and no one's going to pay for that.
You gotta just indulge, develop what you love about it, so that when you then come up with, oh, but then we couldn't show this on TV, or it is kind of contrived, or whatever it is, you'll love it so much that you will have the inspiration to fix it.
The forces of conflict, sometimes they come from like friendship stories or romance stories or whatever, but like every show at some levels, it's us against the world. And so you can't do anything without conflict, but you also, the conflict doesn't have to be two people just like ripping on each other. That's the kind of humor that I never liked personally. I never liked we're going to make fun of each other brutally and negatively for like 29 minutes, and then in the last minute go like, we're still friends. Like that I've never liked as a method of comedy delivery system. The world is screwed up and awful and miserable and scary and terrible. And given that we all know that, it doesn't make a lot of sense to make art that says that the world is screwed up and miserable and scary and terrible. What makes more sense, or is more interesting to me, is to say, okay, given that the world is miserable and scary and screwed up and terrible, what's a solution? What's a path through the miserableness and the scariness and the terribleness? What's a prescription that we can give to people who are interfacing with this art, who are reading this novel or this poem or who are watching this show, where we can say like, yeah, we know, we're on we acknowledge your anxieties about the world that you live in, And we're going to try to say, like, here's something you might do to make yourself feel better, or to here's a path through the maze.
Hello everyone, thanks for watching. On this channel, we are going to be learning how some of the best TV shows and films were created, hearing from the creators themselves. If this is something that would be interesting to you, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and join us as we take a look behind the curtain.